onto your butt.
Da-da-da. Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 174 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. As usual, I'm joined by Mary, a woman who was not invited to any of her high school reunions. I am just a grumpy old codger named Darren. How we doing, Mary? Happy Friday night.
Happy Friday. Well, I wouldn't have gone anyway if I was invited.
Although, you weren't even invited.
Okay, although my high school did have an all-years reunion, I think in 2000 or 2001 or something, which I did go to some of the stuff with, but I was at a high school reunion with my parents because they went to the same high school. It was weird.
Wasn't that juvie?
Yeah.
Well, in any case.
Yeah, my parents also were.
In any case. What's going on, Mary? How we doing? Happy Friday night.
Well, it's good to be back recording again. I'm looking forward to recording this episode for a couple of weeks now, and especially ever since we planned all these episodes, like probably a month and a half ago, we planned these episodes.
But speaking of planning, I am planning to ask you a special question. And that, of course, is what are you drinking?
Well, I broke away from protocol, and I'm having some Card Bordeaux wine tonight.
Oh, fancy.
Box red wine.
Fancy.
It is good.
Call her up. Outstanding.
You can get it for $20 in Maryland.
Oh, nothing but the good stuff.
In Hagerstown.
Excellent. All right.
How about you? What are you drinking?
Oh, thank you, Mary. Thanks for asking. I'm drinking, it's called We All Need a Friend. It's called Anchorage Brewing Company, and, well, that's what it is. And I'm drinking it from my Joshua Chamberlain Tavern mug in Brunswick, Maine. So that's what it is. But
oh, I forgot to add that I am drinking my wine, because this is all classy, out of a mug. It says the North, Undefeated Civil War Champions. And I'm pretty sure some of the folks we're going to be talking about in this episode probably would have not have appreciated this mug nor bought it as a souvenir at the reunions.
But tonight we're going to talk about an event that happened right here in Gettysburg just over 88 years ago, and that was the third and final reunion of the Civil War vets at the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg that took place between June 29th and July 6th of 1938. And it was estimated that there was over 250,000 people here. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who helped dedicate the Eternal Peace Memorial in Oak Hill on July 3rd of 1938. And I'm sure anyone listening to this podcast has seen those grainy videos of FDR's speech or the parade going down Baltimore Street, or the videos of the vets hanging out in camp, swapping stories of days of yore.
Shaking hands.
Oh, yeah. There's a video of an old vet doing a dance that looks like how you dancing to Bananarama when it comes on at the mine. But in the end, 1,835 Civil War veterans, 1,359 from the Union, and 486 Confederates found their way to Gettysburg, including a small number who actually fought at the battle. Numbers vary between 25 and 65. No one really knows. But the story of the 75th reunion of Gettysburg is a fascinating one, not only for the men who came, but for the fact that they actually pulled it off. And just having these reunions kind of goes back to really when the war ended.
Yeah, and it was actually, so they slowly start after the war ends, kind of casually, like not really documenting too much of them, but it was in 1881, so 20 years after the beginning of the Civil War, that news of the recently discovered Luray Caverns in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley had finally spread around to the East Coast. Now, these caverns were important in the Shenandoah Valley campaign, and Union veterans in Carlisle, PA, obviously they received this news, and the Carlisle Post of the Grand Army of the Republic wrote to the men in Luray proposing an excursion to the caverns. They suggested a friendly exchange of greetings with surviving members of the Confederate Army that were in that area. They proposed friendly handshaking, and the GAR said they would also furnish a band of music. Hopefully it wasn't Uncle Cracker, because we all know what controversy that would cause.
I never heard of him until this week, man. I'm not going to lie to you.
Hopefully it was a brass band. And they also said, if you think favorably of meeting us there with as many comrades as you can conveniently muster, we should be pleased to form new acquaintances. So on July 21st, 1881, Confederate veterans from the Shenandoah Valley gathered at the Luray train station to greet 600 Pennsylvanians, their former enemies. Lieutenant Andrew Brodus, Confederate veteran and local newspaper editor, delivered an address there. In part of it, he called upon both sides to forget the war, reminding them that only cowards bear malice and that brave men forgive. GAR Post, so Grand Army of the Republic Post Commander Judge R.M. Henderson from Carlisle, agreed, but he also added that veterans should forget everything except the lessons of the past. He implied that while veterans can gather to shake hands, neither side should surrender the cause for which they fought. This is actually an important thing to remember when you're looking at any of these reunions.
That's right.
And because of this, these reunions often would create a deeper attachment to the respective causes for both North and South. And that's important to remember even to this day when we're remembering the Civil War and looking at these reunions. So these reunions in the 1880s and 1890s, to the general public, they start to create this idea that the horrors of the Civil War are gone and that maybe there is reconciliation. Now, the creation of the first national parks, like national military parks like Chickamauga, which was the first one, followed very closely by Gettysburg. Popular magazines and even political campaigns encouraged North and South to embrace their former enemies with brotherly love and American progress. And this ends up leaving a very whitewashed historical memory of the Civil War. This is one effect of these reunions. Mm-hmm. But what I just mentioned above is not the case for how the veterans felt. The majority of veterans adamantly defended their own causes as being right while refuting their opponent without merit.
Of course.
Neither Union nor Confederates were willing to forget all that happened, and true reconciliation between the sides was very rare. Veterans on both sides, even when they attend these reunions, are competing for memories of the war, its causes, its consequences, to advance their own personal and political agendas. In 1888, you have the 25th reunion of Gettysburg. In 1913, you have the 50th reunion. And at both these reunions, despite the pictures you see of veterans shaking hands, many choose to stay among their own side in their camps.
There's that famous 1913 story where somebody, it was a Confederate here, who insulted President Lincoln and ended up in a fist fight down at the square. I mean, a lot of the pictures, you're right, that you see of these guys hanging out and swapping stories, you know, there were some hard feelings. I mean, it's hard to swallow it. And when we get to the 75th here in a few minutes, the subject of this episode, you know, the feelings still never really went away. They'd cool. These guys were in their 90s by then. But these first ones, it's hard to imagine. You know, you're fighting with your brother, your friend, your uncle, your father, whoever, and you're seeing someone shot and killed or whatever happened, captured. You know, it's hard to just simply say, well, you know, good game, have a nice, you know, shake and move on.
Quote unquote, let's bury the hatchet. And that's not the way it was. And I mean, I do think we should do an episode with an even deeper dive into these reunions and some of the stuff that happened and some of the stuff that was said that led to it. Yes, it is animosity still carried. And I think in some ways you still see it today. Even when the reunions happen, obviously there's no veterans alive today.
Well, the 175th reunion coming up here soon will probably be, I'm sure it'll be a much cooler. Probably a quiet day.
Is it ever a quiet day in Gettysburg, though?
Anyways.
But this leads us into what tonight's topic is, which is the 1938 reunion, the 75th anniversary, which is going to be the last Gettysburg reunion.
Yeah, and to tell the story, you have to go kind of how this whole thing started, speaking of the 75th reunion again. And again, you've had a couple already, and they really didn't go over all that really great.
No.
But in the mid-1930s, the veterans groups from two opposing sides, like you mentioned, the Grand Army of the Republic and the United Confederate Veterans, you know, a lot of them were still alive. Well, some of them were still alive anyway. But the meeting, those organizations were still very active.
Yep.
They met regularly amongst themselves, but never really met together. By this time, like we said, the survivors were getting old. Most of these guys are in their 90s. And because of the age of the veterans, it was obvious that their time was running out, and some people here in Pennsylvania made it their goal that some sort of final reunion needed to be held. Enter a Pennsylvania state senator named John S. Rice. Rice was a Gettysburg resident, and he made a presentation to the Pennsylvania state legislature that this should happen, but it should not only happen, it should be a state event, but it should also be large enough where it should be a national event with historical significance. So for this to happen, Rice needed federal funding, so soon committees were organized to make this whole thing happen. In Pennsylvania, the governor of the time, his name was George H. Earl, and he created a 10-member commission. And down in Washington, D.C., President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he also created a 5-man commission on the federal side. It was the work of these two combined commissions that tried to work out these details, to make this reunion a uniquely special event for not just the veterans, but for the country as well.
Yep.
But Mary, there are problems. There are problems. There always are. Because unlike nowadays, when we are blessed with the internet and sending emails or sliding into DMs, right? Back in the 1930s, the logistical problems for communications was brutal. I mean, it was real. This combined federal and state commission, they had to locate these guys from all around the country to make a list of people to invite if they could even find them. So they reached out to the U.S. Pension Bureau, soldier homes, state treasuries, all the local bang barns, country clerks, etc., to find names and addresses for all living Civil War veterans. And their research actually showed some success. They found 12,500 veterans still living in the United States, and even, Mary, a couple of dozen living in Canada.
Yeah, I can believe it.
Probably wearing denim and hating life. But before they could even think about beginning to invite veterans, there was a huge elephant in the room, and that this commission needed to deal with first. And this is what you kind of hinted at a few minutes ago. This was getting the blessing of the two largest vet groups, the GAR and the UCV, both who needed to agree to any sort of combined reunion.
Yep.
In 1935, there was a real negative feeling by the Union of Confederate Veterans to have any sort of combined reunion, especially if it took place on Northern soil. Likewise, in the North, the GAR wasn't exactly peachy keen in doing cartwheels at the concept of doing a reunion with former Confederates either.
Yep.
So to gain the mandatory commitment from both groups, the Pennsylvania Commission Executive Secretary, his name was Paul L. Roy.
Who happened to be from Gettysburg.
Right, or Wah, as you Canadians would probably say it.
Yeah.
He was a person in charge of lobbying both groups to gain their approval. Now, Roy knew the hardest task was going to convince the Confederates. He absolutely did.
Yep.
Especially when this thing was going to be in Gettysburg, north of the Mason-Dixon line, right? So what does he do? He travels down to Amarillo, Texas for the 1935 UCV convention to meet with Adjutant General and Chief of Staff General Harry Rene Lee.
Oh, I love this guy's response.
Yeah, who the vets naturally called General Lee. Yeah. Why wouldn't they? Harry Rene Lee was said to be a gruff and miserable man, a true get-off-my-lawn guy, if there ever was one, but someone who the UCV leadership respected and listened to. In Roy's book about the reunion, was called The Last Reunion of the Blue and the Gray, Roy discussed his meeting with Harry Rene Lee. He wrote, this is his quote now, quote, "General Lee, I came to Amarillo to talk with you about the proposed Blue and Gray reunion to be held in Gettysburg. My name is," and then he pauses. That's as far as I got when Lee interrupted and he said, quote, "Young man, I thought you would come down here and try to get my organization to go to Gettysburg to meet with those damn Yankees. But I'm here to tell you there is no go. The answer is no. Emphatically and positively no."
So what was his answer?
Someone's beating around the bush a little bit, if you ask me. But the thing about it, though, Roy didn't quit, and he finally won Lee over, who eventually decided to support the reunion and gave the UCV's blessing so the Confederate veterans, would come along. So from there, Roy is going to travel straight to Grand Rapids, Michigan, where the 69th encampment of the GAR was going on, and to invite them to the reunion as well.
But they refused to meet with him.
There was a lot of nopes being tossed around in Grand Rapids, Mary. Yep. They didn't want to do it either. As a matter of fact, when he got there, the brass of the GAR refused to even meet with him.
Yep.
So, these old scars, they don't heal, at least not often anyway. And many of the Northern vets still felt resentment towards the Confederates invading the North, and they wanted no part of a large reunion with them. But again, Roy was finally able to meet with their top officials, and after what was described as, quote, "several heated discussions by various factions of the GAR," they finally agreed to attend to join the Confederates for a reunion on the battlefield at Gettysburg in 1938 for the 75th reunion. But the next task was to get that list of veterans they've been working on and prepare to send formal invitations to join the reunion.
And it's not just veterans from Gettysburg they're going after, right? They want, hey, if you fought in the Civil War.
Well, that's the thing. The government being the government, it was any veteran, but they first had to determine
Yeah.
what the definition of a veteran was. Because remember, the reason was, during that search, the commission found that there was people like civilian body servants, teamsters, fake brevet majors, woods clowns, civilian nurses. There was a lot of that, right? So it was determined that since those people really never enlisted, they would be excluded from the event. So the commission then defined veteran as, quote, one who was regularly enlisted in the armed forces of either the Union or the Confederacy, who actually saw service during the War of 1861 to 1865. I guess to make sure it was the right war. But beyond that, no one else is going to receive an official invitation from the government. Now, federal records of Union veterans were obtained without too much of a problem. But for the Rebs, it was a different story. Was not a lot to be found, right?
Yeah.
So for the Confederates, the commission had to deal with incomplete records. The fact that some, fought in temporary home guards or other peripheral aspects of the Confederate Army.
Perhaps they did not have a home.
Well, you had guerrillas who claimed they fought for the Confederacy, but the Confederates say, hey, we don't know them, they don't speak for us, right? So you can see why there was confusion. But since it was borderline impossible to document these cases, the commission basically said if there was no official record, you didn't belong to the UCV or another Southern veteran group, then you were not eligible to attend as a veteran.
Well, they did write letters to the presidents of the United Daughters of the Union Veterans, as well as the United Daughters Confederacy as well, to say like, hey,
well, they tried everything. They wanted to make sure. So after all their research of the vets was completed, approximately 10,500 invitations were sent by the commission, which also included those sent to various dignitaries, media, all that stuff, right? These invitations were mailed to the veterans in December of 1936. The Federal Commission received 1,890 acceptances, 2,226 declinations, and 2,243 cases where the letters were returned deceased. Now, some responded, hey, I'd love to come, but I'm too sick to show up. There was that. A guy named William Perrine, who fought for the 1st New Jersey Cavalry, he wrote in his questionnaire, quote, I am very deaf and my sight is failing, but if I am able to, I will come. 1 month later, his daughter, Mrs. Gertrude Van Nest, wrote a second letter, and she wrote, quote, my father will not be able to go as the excitement of going has upset his mind. He is 94 years old and never traveled very much, and he's very deaf since the war. The acceptance forms also contains information as to the name and the address of the veteran, the unit for which they served during the war, the name and address of the attendant, and the name and the address of someone to be notified in case of emergency, just like they do today. But again, since we're talking about the government, the information requested caused an issue. It caused a problem.
Of course it did.
The requested info and survey explained to the veterans the basic details of the reunion, including that all the costs are going to be paid for by the government from the state of Pennsylvania and the federal government. But it asked them some basic questions, like a questionnaire. Now remember, most of these veterans were in their 90s. So you can imagine how completing a government survey form must have gone for these guys. Just imagine, right?
Well, imagine how it goes for you and I.
Oh, yeah, you. I'm feel that. But one of the things it mentioned was the veterans would be allowed to bring along a male attendant with them, which caused an issue because many of the vets wanted to bring their wives, their daughters, their girlfriends, a female nurse, whoever, right? After an outcry from veterans as well as from people in Washington, the decision was reversed, so female attendants were allowed. Now, the same form was sent to both Union and Confederate veterans. And the other thing that asked the survey was if you wanted to add any remarks, any comments. Like when you fill a survey, it says comments, any additional comments. Yep. Well, as you can imagine, they took full advantage, right?
People have opinions.
Now, what really surprised the commission, though, was even though they probably should have seen it coming, the presence of the Confederate flag was a big deal for a lot of these people.
I can imagine.
Selden Sturger, he was a veteran of the 47th Illinois. He was living in Oakland, California. And he wrote in the remarks section, quote, I should prefer that the Confederate flag not be displayed. We are all loyal to the Stars and Stripes only. Conversely, John A. Mullins, who was a veteran of the 1st Georgia Cavalry, he wrote, quote, I will march under the U.S. flag with my own colors of the Confederacy.
Oof.
Okay, well, now here's the thing. I was able to locate a lot of the sheets and spent almost 2 hours reading through some of these comments. In some of these individual forms, the comments are gold. They really are. Marvin Grattan, who fought with the Navy on the USS Ouachita, he wrote on his, quote, I knew Lincoln. He was my father's lawyer, and I heard his debate with Douglas. Okay, that's kind of cool. One of the questions, this is a good one. One of the questions in the form said, did you serve with the Union? Yes or no? The next question, did you serve with the Confederacy? Yes or no? It was the same form for both.
Yeah.
Thomas Shelley of the 17th Illinois, this is how he answered. Did you serve with the Union Army? Quote, that's me. Yes, sir, I did. Next question, did you serve with the Confederacy? Quote, not by a jugful. Some took the opportunity to detail their service. Calvin Blanchard of the 111th PA, he wrote... I
wonder if he's related to our friend Mark.
He probably is. Probably him, actually. But he wrote, quote, at Antietam, wounded and laid on the battlefield all night. I later shook hands with President Lincoln, was the color bearer in my regiment on Sherman's campaign from Chattanooga to the sea.
Wow, that's awesome.
Joshua Bowser of the 103rd PA wrote, quote, I enlisted when I was 15, and at 17 I was taken prisoner and taken to Andersonville.
Ouch.
Some of the responses were from family members and told them that there was some tough times the veterans were dealing with. Mary Dolores Miller, the wife of Captain Berzilla Miller, declined the invitation by saying, quote, Berzilla Miller will not attend your invitation. He has lost his mind and does not recognize his children. He is just like a 2-year-old.
Oh.
So it goes back and forth with these. But these comments go on. And I would suggest anyone who's interested go on to the Library of Congress website and spend some time reading them, because there are some funny ones, there are some sad ones, but it's very uniquely personal.
Yeah.
Because some people tell their stories and it's their opportunity. So I would suggest check that out. That's your homework assignment if you listen to this. But the commission agreed that each veteran and attendant should be entitled to a per diem allowance of not to exceed $6 for each full day of 24 hours. This allowance to be in lieu of subsistence in all incidental expenses of travel.
That's actually probably for 1938 pretty good.
It's $142 a day.
Whoa.
Which is enough to last you 3 hours at happy hour at Gettysburg Eddies. But that's good money.
Yeah.
$142 for I can survive $142 a day here in town. But the commission, they built a tent city in today's Gettysburg College, which housed 7,000 people. It was laid out with lighted walkways. Each veteran was given a 9-foot by 9-foot wall tent for himself and his attendant. Each tent had a wooden floor and a front porch with mosquito netting and a screen door. Kind of a nice little setup.
That's actually pretty sweet.
Each tent had 2 cots and bedding, an electric table lamp, water pitcher, rubber seat pads, and canes. The tent city also had 3 separate kitchens, 55 mess tents, a 300-bed hospital, a post office, and telephone banks. They built a 22,500-seat stadium nearby for the ceremonies and hired a fleet of 40 buses to take the veterans around town and through the battlefields. The total cost of the government for this in 1963 money was $323,000.
That's 1963 money?
1963 money.
Wow.
No, 1938 money.
I was going to say.
Lose my mind. 1938 money was $323,000. That's $7.6 million today.
Wow.
That's how much Pennsylvania in the federal government paid for this. The United States Army provided an entire medical regiment to care for the vets, while the Pennsylvania National Guard, state police, and the local fire department handled the traffic. See, who says that Gettysburg doesn't have a huge project? They have traffic study first, right? They can do it. They've done it before. A large group of Boy Scouts were brought in to act as messengers and guides for the veterans. There was also more than 100 reporters, photographers, radio broadcasters registered to add to media coverage. So this was set up to be a huge national event, and it as promoted as the final reunion of Civil War veterans.
Yep.
Like we said before, the official veteran attendance was 1,845. There was 1,359 Union, 486 Confederates. The average age of each veteran was a mind-boggling 94 years old.
Wow.
That's 1,845 94-year-old average age people walking the streets of Gettysburg. Feels like I'm back on the Cape. But soldiers came from every state, and they fought in the war. You know what state? There was one state that didn't come. You know what state it was?
Ohio, no.
Rhode Island.
Why?
Who knows? They had no representation. So by July 1st of 1938, veterans started to arrive in town via train as well as automobiles. Historian Charles A. Earp, he wrote a small book called The 75th Reunion at Gettysburg, My Interviews with Veterans, which, in my opinion, gives the best first-hand account of the event by describing his encounters with the veterans.
Yep.
He describes riding to Gettysburg on the train from Baltimore and seeing both Union and Confederate veterans on the train, all dressed in full uniform. He arrived at Lincoln train station, right downtown, and he described the mob scene of people when he arrived. He said the town was loaded with visitors, vendors, military personnel. The streets and restaurants were crowded with tourists, for this big reunion. No word if motorcycles revved their engines and blasted music when people are trying to enjoy drinks. Who the hell knows? But the official reunion officially began on July 1st, 1938, at 1 p.m. at the Gettysburg College Stadium. It was kicked off by John B. Rice, that man we mentioned earlier who put this whole thing together. Day one was called, quote, Reunion Day. There was an opening prayer by Reverend Martin Stone from Jamestown, New York, followed by an official welcome by Pennsylvania Governor George Earle and the United States Secretary of War Harry Woodring.
He'd been part of the committee.
Yep.
The federal government formed.
There was an official address by the head of the GAR, Dr. Overton Mennett, and the commander-in-chief of the UCV, John Claypool. Sadly, that grumpy official, Harry Rene Lee, General Lee, he passed away just 4 months prior to the reunion.
Oh.
And he didn't live long enough to see the event that he authorized on the Confederate side. It's kind of
Can you imagine if he'd been here, though?
Oh, it would have been a good time.
Yeah.
Would have been.
He probably would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So when the first day's festivities basically concluded, the veterans were taken to the battlefield and into town and their guides, and they enjoyed the nightlife of Gettysburg. They probably went to the mine, Tent City, who knows where they went. But visitors could stroll through the Union and Confederate tent cities and mingle with the veterans. Historian Charles Earp, the one who wrote that book I mentioned a second ago, he noted that within the Confederate encampment, many of the Rebs gave themselves the title of general. They wore general stars, despite the fact that most were as privates during the war. It's like when you go to a reunion and people just wear whatever. They were all generals, or a lot of them were generals, right?
Wow, there's a lot of generals here.
He said the Union troops, for the most part, wore double-breasted blue uniforms. Many had Spanish-American war hats, instead of Civil War kepis. One of the celebrities of the event was Helen Dortch Longstreet, the widow of Confederate General James Longstreet, who signed autographs for anybody who asked. Of the 1,835 veterans at the reunion, only approximately 65, and that's debated, most people think it was a little lower, actually fought at the Battle of Gettysburg. Some of the Gettysburg vets who were present and returned to the battlefield were Peter P. Smith of the 2nd Maryland CSA, who was wounded at Culp's Hill fighting the Pennsylvania Bucktails in the 1st Maryland Potomac Brigade.
Wow.
Another was William O. Gillette, a 93-year-old Confederate from Louisiana, who by all accounts never stopped talking the entire time. He survived Pickett's charge after fighting with the 2nd Mississippi in Heath's division. He said of the charge, quote, "When we reached the high water mark, the fire was so intense there was nothing for us to do but run like hell." That's what he said, right? 75 years later, at the reunion, Gillette walked the same path he took at Pickett's charge, and when he got to the wall, he met and shook the hands of Union troops waiting for him for that stage photo, everybody says.
Yep.
If you've seen the video, if you watch the video of it, and one of them, they do a little rebel yell, and one leans in and says, "That's the rebel yell." That's Gillette. That's him.
That's really cool.
That's the actual guy. Gillette also told stories to the visitors outside of his tent, because he was holding court, how he was a major on Stonewall Jackson's staff until his death at Chancellorsville.
Oh my God.
And Gillette also said he entertained the men in camp during the war by dancing to the music of Jeb Stuart's banjo player, a musician named Sweeney, in front of the laughing rebel troops. So he was kind of like the court jester, apparently.
Yeah, that's
what he was.
I wonder how much of it was true.
He was a life of the party. Who knows? Yeah. Another Gettysburg veteran, 96-year-old Cornelius Sweet of the 137th New York and Dave Ireland's regiment. He talked about being driven out of the rifle pits on Culp's Hill. They retook them later. But Sweet basically told all that listened that if his regiment didn't hold the Rebs at Culp's Hill, their line would have been totally swept away. We've talked about that,
Yeah.
After the war, Sweet became a reverend. And then he delivered sermons up to his death just over a year after the reunion at Gettysburg.
Wow.
So he was until 95 years old doing sermons.
Good for him.
The second day of the event, July 2nd, it was called, quote, Veterans Day.
Yeah.
And it was highlighted by a parade at 1:30 p.m. This parade was massive. It lasted 2.5 hours, stretched 3.5 miles, featured modern U.S. Army tanks, units, the whole deal. But unlike modern parades, if you've been to a parade in Gettysburg, it started at the other end. This parade started at the intersection of Baltimore and Steinway,
Yep.
where the gas station where the pump never works is,
Yep.
with the old Wagon Hotel near Patty O'Rourke's, right at stone's throw from where
Yep.
we are right now. It went north of Baltimore Street through the square, went west on Chambersburg Street, and then took a right near the seminary, finishing at Gettysburg College.
Yep. Did you know there was a Marine Corps band there as well as a 50 drum and bugle corps?
I can't believe I missed it.
Oh, hopefully that makes people happy.
But the Grand Marshal was Major General Edward C. Shannon of the 28th Infantry Division. He was a vet of the Spanish-American War and World War I. Following that parade, and they had dinner in their tent cities, the vets were invited to a band concert by the band you just mentioned, the U.S. Marine Band. And
I thought you meant Uncle Cracker.
Yeah, Uncle Cracker was here. It was very exciting. But the concert was followed by speeches by John S. Rice, the Master of Ceremonies, as well as Dr. Overton Mennett, the head of the GAR, and John Claypool, we mentioned, was the Commander-in-Chief of the United Confederate Veterans. The highlight of the reunion took place on July 3rd of 1938, and the third day was called, quote, President and Peace Memorial Day. The day started at 7:30 in the morning with the military field mass right in the college stadium, before moving later in the afternoon to Oak Hill for a speech by President Roosevelt and the unveiling of the Eternal Peace Light Memorial. At 6:30 p.m., after speeches by Governor Earl, President Roosevelt was introduced by the governor to dedicate and unveil the new memorial. It is said that over 250,000 people jammed the fields in the first day's battle to hear Roosevelt's speech. Less than 2 miles away from where Lincoln gave his speech back in 1863, people were turned away for miles.
Wow.
The roads were so clogged you couldn't get anywhere near here. This time, instead of speaking during the Civil War, Roosevelt was speaking on the eve of what would become World War II in Europe.
Yep.
So I'm not going to read his entire speech. I'm just going to read a couple parts of it, Roosevelt's speech, okay? So this is how he started. Quote, Governor Earl, veterans of the blue and the gray, on behalf of the people of the United States, I accept this monument in the spirit of brotherhood and peace. Immortal deeds and immortal words have created here at Gettysburg a shrine of American patriotism. We are encompassed by the last full measure of devotion of many of the men by the words of which Abraham Lincoln expressed the simple faith for which they died. Lincoln spoke in solace for all who fought upon this field, and the years have laid their balm upon their wounds. Men who wore the blue and men who wore the gray are here together, a fragment spared by time. They are brought here by memories of old divided loyalties, but they meet here in united loyalty to a united cause which the unfolding years have made it easier to see. All of them we honor, not asking under which flag they fought, but thankfully that they stand together under one flag now. His speech went about 9 minutes, and then they had a 50-foot U.S. flag that covered the new memorial. It was removed by Union veteran George N. Lockwood and Confederate veteran A.G. Harrishow.
Both 91 years old.
91 years old. Can you imagine that?
And they had 2 regular Army attendants with them, which
They did.
probably a good idea.
Yeah. But the new monument was a tall, square shaft rising from the center of a small stone platform and is topped by a bronze urn with an eternal flame. I don't know if people know this, but the base is made from Maine granite, and the top is made from Alabama limestone.
Yep.
That's why it's different colors.
Which is to, I guess, signify reconciliation.
Hey!
Yeah. Oh, look at me. The other thing that happened during July 3rd on day 3 of this reunion was Army aircraft staged a simulated air raid on Gettysburg at dusk, and searchlights were directed from the ground at the planes while they dropped flares.
No, it's funny.
I was like, jeez.
But go back to the monument real quick. On the southern face, the monument is a relief symbolizing permanent peace and good between the North and the South. It features 2 embracing females, figures holding a wreath while an eagle stands at their feet. It was created by artists Paul Philippe Crête and Lee Oscar Lowry. It was named the Eternal Peace Light Memorial. The entire monument cost 60 grand, which is 1.4 million in today's money. And then the eternal flame was lit by two men from the then modern United States Army. But you mentioned before, following the night of dinner and dancing, that flyover you mentioned it was not just it was by 24 A-17s, 6 B-17s, flying fortresses, and 18 PB-2s that dropped those flares. What's funny about it, the veterans and the spectators were warned, don't pick up the flares on the ground that are burning.
But someone did, right?
It doesn't say, but they specifically had I was reading the details. There was warnings. Attention, please do not touch the burning
Someone
flares.
did.
Someone did. Because of course they did.
Because why not?
But in the end, this brainchild of John S. Rice was a huge success as the veterans and spectators, began their travels home. But it should be noted, though, that the experience wasn't without accidents, which is unavoidable when you have 1,800 90-year-olds in the hot sun in July for up to 6 days.
Yep.
James Hammaker, a 94-year-old resident of Aledo, Texas, attended the reunion. His wife Betty and his children had all died previously, so he was all by himself. Hammaker's final wish in his life was to visit the tree which he had been shot twice during the Battle of Gettysburg.
Wow.
Hammaker had earlier in the war served under Stonewall Jackson and was at Gettysburg was part of Pickett's charge. He was captured by Union troops and sent off to a hospital after he was shot, and which apparently made him homeless, but that's, but I digress.
Shouldn't laugh, sorry.
But in June of 1938, Hammaker began his long trip from Texas by train to Pennsylvania, very, very excited about the reunion. He was just so excited. Just before he arrived in Gettysburg, he was on a bunk bed on his train, and he fell.
Oh, no.
And he broke his shoulder. When Hammaker arrived in Gettysburg, he said what happened, and he was sent to the hospital and told the staff of his last wish. And he said, quote, "If I could get to that tree, I can die happy." Now, some of the medical staff and fellow veterans took Hammaker around the battlefield to try to find the tree where he was shot, but the train had changed over the years, and he wasn't able to find it. Finally, Hammaker gave up, and he said, quote, "I guess I better get home to my rocking chair." After his return from Gettysburg, that shoulder injury never recovered right. On September 5th, 1938, Hammaker's housekeeper checked on him and said shortly after he got up from his rocking chair, walked to the bathroom, and when he returned, she found him motionless. He survived being shot twice during Pickett's charge, but it was the third Gettysburg wound, which he got when he traveled for a peaceful reunion, would be his mortal injury, allowing him only a few final weeks of life until he died on his porch in Texas in that rocking chair.
Oh, my gosh.
Another veteran who attended the Gettysburg reunion was 94-year-old Wilson Polk Wallace of Ozone, Arkansas, who was making his first trip to Gettysburg. During the war, Wallace fought with Company H of the 17th Arkansas, primarily in the Western Theater.
Yeah.
He was not an Eastern guy. But even though he didn't fight at Gettysburg, Wallace was thrilled to see his invitation to the 75th reunion and quickly confirmed his attendance. One of his peers said of Wallace, quote, "If Wallace saw a Confederate flag or heard Dixie played or sung, his patriotic spirit became so alive and full of pep that enthusiastic collegiate prep leaders might well be abashed." Wilson P. Wallace was accompanied to Gettysburg by his son Cecil and his friends and fellow veteran James S. Wilson, who also served in that Arkansas infantry. Wilson and Wallace were photographed together at the reunion, and the photo was sent back to their hometown paper, the Hope Star, where it appeared under the headline, quote, "Wilson and Wallace at Gettysburg, join in a ceremony uniting the blue and the gray." And they were kind of like local celebrities.
Yeah.
When the reunion was over, Wilson Wallace began his trip home, and he got sick along the way and had to stop in St. Louis to go to the hospital. He died just a few days later on July 9th, 1938. But in his last moments, Wallace spoke of the reunion. His last words before he died were, quote, "I am so glad I came."
Wow.
But Gettysburg meant something to these veterans, and even though they didn't fight there,
Yeah.
it just showed by the number of soldiers on both sides in the last years of their life made the trip to southern PA in that heat of July.
Well, I think they knew it was going to be the last one.
Yeah. But it should be noted, too, that when the GAR finally had their final meeting on August 30th of 1949 now in Indianapolis, the 6 remaining veterans on the Union side, Theodore Penland, Robert Barrett, James A. Hard, Charles Chappell, Joseph Clavisi, and the last surviving Union veteran, Albert Wilson, were all at the 75th reunion at Gettysburg. They were all there in 1938. On the Confederate side, the final 3 veterans to attend their last meeting in Norfolk, Virginia, out of the 3, John Salling of the 25th Virginia was at Gettysburg at the 75th reunion. So they did come. Salling, actually, he traveled to Norfolk on an airplane for the first time from Georgia. This man, a Civil War veteran, flying an airplane.
Yeah, that's what one thing I was thinking is like these guys are seeing airplanes like fly over at this reunion.
But this guy was something. Yeah. It was funny. They asked him, the news said, why in the world would you come over to Norfolk for this reunion? His quote to the newspaper was, quote, "I came to see all the pretty girls." That's what his quote was. Boys be boys, right? But the story of the 70th reunion at Gettysburg is a great one. I mean, from the veterans' perspective or from the civilians' perspective, if you get a chance to go on YouTube and watch those grainy videos from 1938, you can truly see the joy on the faces, of these old veterans, and it really is. And it's obviously they're all gone now, but because of technology and videos and pictures, you can see them. You can see their voices. You can hear their voices. You can see their facial expressions. And if you watch the videos of the 38 reunion at Gettysburg, you can just see the joy. They were so happy to be here. They knew this was one of the last things they'll ever do. Yeah. Most of them hadn't traveled anywhere. They came from as far as Los Angeles. They came from Canada, except Rhode Island, apparently. Yep. But it just goes to show how impactful it was. And when you walk the town, if you go to Gettysburg College, if you stand on Oak Hill, if you're out there by the... That's
where they launched the fireworks from on July the 4th, 1938.
But if you stand out there and you're looking towards Gettysburg College and you see the baseball field and the softball field, that big field was where the King Cabin was. And you can still see the pictures. You can still put it all together. And you can still look at some of the maps and still see some places they went. So I think it's a story that doesn't often get told. I've not really seen too many people talking about the 75th reunion at Gettysburg, but since we just had the anniversary not too long ago, I think it's important that people come to Gettysburg all the time who come maybe probably more than they should. Some people actually buy a house and move down here.
Yep.
But we just come down because we're history nerds. We're Civil War enthusiasts. We want to know. We want to walk the ground. They came here because they wanted to come where they fought, or came where their side fought.
Where they got wounded. They wanted to see where they were wounded again.
And they wanted to be a soldier one more time. Yeah. And they wanted to sit down and tell the stories, tell the old yarns, smoke the cigars, and tell all the stuff they did. Because for most of them, that was the most exciting time of their lives.
Yep. And honestly, if you go to like what is today now a reenactment, and you're sitting around that fire at night, the soldiers always come up. You're sitting around telling stories, just like the veterans did at these reunions.
And so it's easy to put yourself in those shoes and just especially when it comes to a place like Gettysburg or any of the battlefields, but especially at Gettysburg because of the big reunion that took place, and it was one of the biggest crowds ever to come here.
Yeah.
It was. So that's a good place we can drop it, I think.
I think so too. And just again, the important thing to remember with these reunions is, like, yes, they were meant to create this kind of reconciliation, but at the same time, both sides who are coming here are still feeling very strongly about why they fought. Mm-hmm. And the other thing to remember too is these men who are coming here in 1938, they've had families, they've had kids, they've had grandkids, they've passed on their stories and their feelings of this battle as well. And I think that's why you have some of the sentiments that you have today. Mm-hmm. It is partially created by these reunions, but this 1938 reunion is obviously a special one because it's the last one. And as you said, you can see like the joy in their faces that they're back here one final time. Mm-hmm. And they probably wanted to see the other veterans, who they fought, not necessarily alongside, but from their side that were still around, and to share those stories and to know that there's still this sense of keeping the history alive.
Yeah, it still resonates today. People still do it today, and even if they're not part of the war. But it must have been a special moment. It must have been, and they talked about, a lot of the veterans talk about how sad it was when it was over, when they left, because when they knew they left here, they knew that they were never going to come back again. They were never going to see their compatriots. They weren't going to see their combatants. They were never going to be in a situation where they're in a tent city in a tent, going to mess and having breakfast and lunch and wearing the uniform or walking around and seeing I mean, that must have been quite an experience for those guys, and for the Boy Scouts and the attendants and the people in town. I mean, it must have been an incredible experience. You can walk to Gettysburg today, and you can still see markers for the 75th reunion, as well as the 1913, as well as the 1888 too.
I think we'll definitely be doing an episode on the 1913 reunion because it is kind of a different beast than this 1938 one.
Yeah, the scars were a little raw back then, but once the Confederate veterans and the GAR both kind of blessed this. I think at that point, the men were more excited to get back to camp again and just try to experience one last time. But yeah, you're talking the 25th or the 50th. It's still a little bit.
I mean, and yeah, in some ways, it still kind of is raw for some people when they talk about the Civil War and they, when the reunions do come up and there's, like, oh, look, it's reconciliation. And when you find out that, especially the 1913 reunion, that the pictures are staged.
And even Albert Wilson, he's got a statue over here in Gettysburg for the GAR. He died in 1956, which I will tell you, Mary, one half of the New York Yankees World Series took place while there were still Civil War veterans alive.
The last time the Guardians won the World Series, or they were Cleveland Indians, there was Civil War veterans alive, quite possibly in attendance at that game.
A long time ago, there probably was. He was probably playing shortstop. But I guess we can drive. Any final words from you there, Fincheru?
No, thank you for bringing it like you always do. I'm glad we were able to visit reunions. Finally, I think it's something that we probably need to do more of a deep dive in as well. Some of the I think looking at the reunions just from the research I did for this, I think it helps us to understand how we view the Civil War today, to understand that some of the sentiments that exist today existed back then as well.
Of course they did. They're still humans. They're still people. I mean, they're still they're soldiers. Rotten soldiers.
Homeboy?
Sweet cheese, my homeboy. All right, so off we go. So everybody have a great weekend. It's warm here, but it's not too bad. It should be a nice weekend. Hopefully you can find some battlefield this weekend. Hopefully you can find something fun to do. Off we go. Everybody have a great time. We'll talk to you all soon on the other side.
See y'all later.
Peace out.
Yep. Bye.